Well, thank you all for coming. There's plenty of room at the front, so don't be shy. But yeah, be wherever you want to be. Hoping that you could find the session room easy. It took me a while to get to this room, a few tries, but yeah, I eventually made it. They also told me to stay in this stand, which I usually find it difficult because I tend to move around. If you see that I'm there, the microphone is here, so just tell me to come back here. Okay. So the session is about api.drupal.org. I assume that most of you have used it, and maybe that's why you are here, and you know what the site is about. But if you don't, then you will hopefully get a good understanding of what the site does. Basically, the current, I didn't want to say this word in the conference, but the current website, api.drupal.org, is on Drupal 7, and we migrated it to Drupal 10. I want to tell you a little bit about the journey that went in the migration, because it was a bit different from the normal website, Drupal website that you may have built, and I found it a really good and interesting project to talk about. So yeah, I hope that you like this session. My name is Frank. I work for the Drupal Association as web developer. You can find me as FJ Gartling in the community Slack, LinkedIn, Gmail, and that's about it. I'm not in many social networks. If you have any question at any point about this project or about any of the other projects I'm involved in, don't hesitate to contact me. Today, I'm going to be obviously explaining very briefly what the API site is about. We're going to talk whether to Drupal or not to Drupal, because yeah, that question kind of came by at some point. We will talk a little bit about the Node module. I think this was an interesting part of the site. We will obviously talk migrations. We migrated a site Drupal 7 to Drupal 10. We talk about queues. We talk a little bit about the infrastructure around the site. We will discuss a little bit custom versus contrib. And then at the end, I will also show you how to spin up your own API parsers. I mean, you can do that in a few seconds in your own computer, and you will get a kind of 99% copy of the API website on your local machine. And you can just play with it, break it as much as you want, and just investigate. And then obviously at the end, we do some Q&A if there are any questions. Cool, so as a beginning, the api.drupal.org site, all it does, it just parses the source code, in this case, Drupal core, but it could be any other module. And from that code, it generates a website. So the content will be exactly the same, except that it will look a bit nicer. It will hopefully be responsive. We can check it from the phone. We don't need to be navigating code. Obviously, most of the newer text editors allow us to jump into functions and these kind of things, but think that the api.drupal.org site was created around 10 years ago. None of those fancy bells and whistles were built into text editors, so it was actually very useful and continues to be. It was written on Drupal 7, so we wanted, needed something new. Obviously, Drupal 7 is coming out of support, so we wanted to start migrating the site. And as I said, as an example, you can see the code of this file. We can see it's class HTML. It's got some static properties, some comments around it. And all the API site does is transform that into an HTML site. We can see class HTML. We can see the properties down there. We can see some of the descriptions, the hierarchy of the class that it extends, all these sort of things. So that's about it for the introduction. Was there anybody that has never used api.drupal.org before? So good. That means I don't need to expand any further on it. One of the first points that I mentioned before was whether to Drupal or not to Drupal. This question was actually a really good one. This was my very first project when I joined the Drupal Association. They told me, we want to rebuild the API website. And as I was kind of getting into it, at some point, it's like, do we even need Drupal? Because there are some tools out there that might be able to do the job. They might not. We will just find out in a second. But we actually question that ourselves. Obviously, we all love Drupal. We want to do Drupal as much as possible. But if Drupal is not fit for the job, then why use it? So you can see the result of the investigation in that repo. Basically, I evaluated a series of tools that are out there. If you just Google code parsers, so that will likely be the first result. PHP Documenter, then there was PHP Docs, and then there was Doctune. In the case of Doctune, I found as well that it was used by Laravel. So these tools were the first things that I checked, because it's if there is a tool that is already doing exactly what we want, why are we going to go through the hassle of building a big Drupal 10 site, maintaining it, etc., etc.? We could just maybe use one of those tools. And when I was testing those tools, I needed to also test on different projects, because obviously we cannot compare my module to Drupal core. My module is 10 files. Drupal core is way more than 10 files. So I actually tested on Drupal core. That was our main goal. But I also tested, for example, on the web form module. It's a decently sized module. And I also tested on the Gene theme. It's a kind of a smaller source code. So these are the repos that I tested with, and these are the tools. And again, if you go to that GitHub repo, you can see all the results, and you can see how to launch all the tools. So which were the pros of using those tools? I mean, first of all, they were already built. I didn't need to write a single line of code. It would have been a great win. First project for the DA done in less than a day. But also there were some other good things. One of them is that it was scriptable. So we could just run a command and say, use this tool with this project, generate a site, boom. So that was a great, great thing to have. They were very easy to use. I mean, obviously, all of them require some learning at the beginning, see the parameters that they need and all these kind of things, but they were relatively easy to use. But there were some issues. I'm looking all the time there, and I have it in here. Sorry about that. I will keep looking at you. One of the main issues was that there was no paginated output. That can seem silly, but again, if we look in my module, maybe even in Gene module, that could be okay, maybe a bit of scrolling. But if you look now in the web form module, you will be scrolling for a while, and I don't want to tell you what would happen with Drupal core. I'm actually going to do it now, because it fails on large code bases. I was testing with Gene, everything good. Even web form, everything good. Tested with core, it could just blow out. It wouldn't work. It would fail 9 out of 10 times. And the 1 out of 10 that would work, it would generate massive files. So all these tools, what they basically do is they generate HTML with CSS and JavaScript. And that JavaScript is what provides the kind of live functionality, live search, clicking around, these kind of things. So they were actually parsing the code, and they were generating a massive JavaScript web file. And in the case of core, one of those times that it did work, it was more than 50 megabytes file. As you can imagine, sending that to each and every one of your computers, it would take a while to load. Okay? So we can start seeing now where we're going to. What I told the team at the beginning is like, maybe this is actually good for contrib. Maybe we shouldn't discard it. I mean, we are using GitLab, and that means that we could use GitLab pages. It is built in. It is already working. We could all use GitLab pages for our modules. And also, we could use GitLab CI, which if you are not using in your modules, you could already. And that means that with GitLab CI, we could actually automate. Remember what I said at the beginning, they were scriptable. So I could actually create a job in GitLab CI that run that tool, again the module, and it produces a website that I can put on GitLab page. So to me, they were very, very valid tools to use for contrib. But it was not good for core. And that was our main use case. That was our goal. So the verdict at the end was easy. Use Drupal, okay? It took me some time to do that investigation, but I think it was worth because also it allowed us to identify the actual needs of what we needed. Like these tools do the job, but they fail here, here, and here. So that means that I need to focus on those fails when I'm building the Drupal site. Okay, we're now using Drupal. That's good. We're all happy. Happy Drupal developers. I got to do a much bigger project, and yeah, it actually made me happy. I started to work on it, and now this was a very interesting part of starting to build the project. I was building it, yeah, before that, I'm going to read you directly a few quotes found in Drupal.org. One of them is, all content on a Drupal website is stored and treated as nodes. You can see it on that link. The node module allows content to be submitted to the site and displayed on the pages. You can find it on that link. Comments are not stored as nodes, but are always connected to one. You can find that there. Okay, let's continue. Our goal is to generate pages from code, but if you want to edit the page, you need to edit the underlying code. If you want to delete a page, you need to delete the underlying code. So we can't really edit pages, we can't delete them, there's no author, there's no updated time. So are our pages really nodes? This was a kind of aha moment at some point. So I'm going to ask you a question. Raise your hand if you have used the node module to build your Drupal site. Good. Now raise it if you have not used the node module to build your Drupal site. Woohoo. We have 3 people, including me. That's, oh wow, 5 people. That's 4 more people that I was expecting. And that is good. I did this presentation a few weeks ago in Drupal Camp, Spain, and there was one other person. I mean, the room was smaller, so kind of was expected. But yeah, you can see that it's a vast minority compared to the first question. You told me that you have not used. Did you try to uninstall it? Because that other person on the camp that told me that didn't use it, the node module was actually enabled, but they did not uninstall it. Did any of you that raised your hand actually uninstall the node module? Okay, that's good. Yeah, that qualifies as not using it. So that is good. I mean, you saw that from those 5 people that didn't use, 3 actually do not use it, but left it enabled. Okay? So what can we use? I mean, we are really questioning nodes in here. What can we use instead? So in this case, have you met Drupal entities? I'm taking more quotes from the Drupal.org site. Entities, this was one of the most important changes of Drupal 7. This is not new to Drupal 8. It was already created for Drupal 7. And it really opened a huge window of possibilities. Entity types in Drupal core, like a lot of Drupal core was actually moved to entities. We're talking of nodes, but we're also talking of comments. We're talking about users. We're talking about taxonomies. We're talking about many of the things that were moved into entities. You can also build new kinds of entity types where the options above don't suit your needs. Why wouldn't I use nodes? Not only the things that I mentioned before, I cannot edit the page, so I don't really need it. But also there is a whole set of hooks that run before, after, like this pre-save, post, all these kind of things. So it's not just really what the UI or kind of the needs, like the editing, the deleting. It's also the logic that goes before and after, which may or may not affect performance, okay? I don't know if you've ever seen the Drupal database, but there is a lot of tables that are created for every single field that you create. So when you start making joins on those tables, then we're starting to hit performance issues if the site grows a little bit. So this comes to this last quote: entity API allows for more lightweight and flexible solutions. So as I said, this was really my aha moment, and I was so happy that I could do it. I don't really need the Node module at all, so I'm just going to uninstall it, and that's what I did. What are we using on the new version of the site? We're just using entities, as I mentioned. We are defining all the tables in there. We're controlling all the functionality within the entities. Note that the old site did use nodes. For every single copy, for every single file, there was a matching node so that the comments could be attached to that node, okay? So the new site does not use the node module, and that was so cool as a developer. Okay, but how did Drupal take it? I mean, we're talking the node module. That was probably the very first, node 1. That's the homepage of every single Drupal site. Any hard feelings? It's kind of my favorite child, my favorite module. So are you sure you really want to go without it? Well, road wasn't easy, but that was the first issue that I found. Do not check node access if the node module is not installed. So there was one module that was actually checking the node access modules, that was making joins to the node tables, even if that core module was not including node as a dependency, yet it was joining tables with node. So everything was just breaking. So that was the issue. I mean, as you know, sometimes with core issues, it may take a day or a week or a month or longer, and a slightly growing conversation, okay? So you can follow that. That big conversation led eventually to this other issue: impossible to reply to comments. That was the module that was actually having a dependency, a hidden dependency on Node, the comments module. So we could make comments, but we could not reply to comments. Every time that you would reply to a comment, white screen of death, all broken. So that first issue eventually moved to that other issue, which had already a long conversation before and had a long conversation after. But eventually, after, my very first patch in the top issue was, if the node module is not enabled, do not make all these joins on the node module, close brackets. But then it's like, we cannot just do that. That kind of solves 50% of the equation. Obviously, if the node module is not enabled, it doesn't make sense to make the joins. But those joins were there for a reason, and the reason was scalability and security. It's like, okay, you are telling me that now comments can be linked to entities. Let's do those same checks for entities. So if you start following the conversations, it all goes around that. There was a lot of back and forth. It's like, okay, we kind of want to have the same information. That wasn't easy to reach. It was a lot of kind of hooks and functions involved, but we eventually got it in there. But finally, there was also another issue. This took a bit shorter. But yeah, it was still failing in some edge cases. We were able to fix it. Happy to say that those 3 issues are all fixed now. Those are the 3 that I discovered while working on the site. It may be, Drupal core size is just huge, so it may be some other hidden dependencies somewhere. I just ran into those. It took a while to fix them, but it's super happy. I don't know if that was maybe one of the first core issues that I was working in, and yeah, it was a thrill to see them committed. So this kind of ends the conversation about the node module. As I said, I found it to be a very cool use case in which I was building a big site without the node module. And this speaks a lot to the power of Drupal. The next question was actually migrations. And again, I'm going to go back to kind of the previous slide. I want to edit a page. I need to edit the file. I want to delete a file. I want to delete a page. I need to delete the file. So I think you kind of are starting to follow what I'm trying to say. So the node module is not needed, but surely we need migrations, right? We need a one-to-one page parity. So before continuing the conversation, I'm just going to take a random URL of one class, a bit long, and the reason for it is just I'm just going to deconstruct it. So obviously we have the site URL, api.drupal.org, then the API prefix that just comes from the API module. Then we have the word Drupal, and that is just because we are viewing the project Drupal. If we were parsing the web form module, it would be web form. Then we have a path, and because it's a URL, we are just encoding the forward slashes into %21. So a big part of the URL is that. Then we have class, that's the element that we are viewing. That's now the name, HTML in this case, the name of the class that we are viewing. And finally, we have the Drupal version that we are viewing the element for. So that kind of means, I mean, if you see that URL, it all came from information about the file itself, the branch of Drupal that I'm parsing. So we can potentially regenerate the whole page with the same path. And here is what I wanted to tell you. That's what we've done, but there were no need whatsoever for migrations, for Drupal migrations in that way. So we are not using migrations in there because we can actually get a one-to-one page parity just by regenerating, reparsing, and regenerating the site. But what about comments? I mean, this is a kind of, I wouldn't say controversial, but it's opinionated topic. As you know, many of you, if you've been using the site for many years, we allow comments on the API site. Comments were attached per branch. So, for example, comments made for the branch 8.4 did not go to 8.5, even if it was in the same class, in the same function, in the same property, in the same everything. If it was on 8.4, there was no visibility whatsoever in any of the other branches. But then at some point, I mean, as you know, we have Drupal 7x or 6x. That was the same branch forever. We started to use Semver versioning. And then we have 8.1, 8.2, 8.3, 4, 5, 6, all the way until 9. I don't know if you saw the navigation at some point on the site, but it was like a huge set of tabs purely for 8 point whatever. And then Drupal 9 came in. It's like, okay, are we going to have like 20, 30 tabs? We really gotta do something about this. So we eventually decided to clean up the unsupported branches and only show the supported ones. And by cleanup, I mean delete. And if I'm deleting the 8.4 branch, I am deleting the 8.4 related comments. We did try at first, we did not delete, we stored the comments in case there was some fallback from the community. And we actually found out that there was no fallback whatsoever. The reason for this is because 98% of the comments in the API Drupal.org site are against the branch. Can you guess? 7. 98% of the comments were against the 7x branch. 2%, I'm not exaggerating, were in all the other branches. So that's why we decided to clean up, see what happened. That was a good test. Okay, so we are only showing now the supported ones. We used to parse as well even the vendor folder, but again, parsing vendor, parsing Symfony, Symfony has its own documentation. So why are we going to do this if they are already doing it and they are probably even doing it better in that sense? So we slash out as well the vendor folder. And with the comments, we had some options. I mean, we can migrate comments if the URL match. Remember that there was a one-to-one page parity. We are trying to get that D7 and D10 site. So for the 7x comments, we could actually migrate them. And that is already implemented in a site module called API Drupal.org. So we just XML export from the view of comments in Drupal 7, and we just feed that file, and we can import them. That functionality is there. So if we want to migrate comments, we would be able to. Another possibility was, why don't we just drop comments altogether and improve the doc blocks? If I need a comment to know how to use a function, that might mean that the documentation of that function is not good enough to show me how to use the function. You know what I mean? So why don't we just stop the possibility of comments, and if somebody finds it difficult conversion, okay, then create an issue unless improve the code documentation, which will benefit everybody in the long run. Another possibility was merging comments between branches. Remember what I said, 8.5, 8.4. But that had a lot of problems like threads, timeline, relevancy. Like if a comment was made at the same time for different branches, does that go on top, below? So that was discarded pretty quick. And then also we found out that the latest Drupal version received less and less and less comments. Remember, we were talking about less than 5% of comments in the whole 8.x and 9 point something at the time branches. So obviously it's not because the site is not live, the decision has not been taken, but comments might be dropped because we think that that's kind of the most sensible. But again, don't get word on that, don't start tweeting, deleting comments, or we have the functionality in there, it is built in. So if we want to migrate the 7.x comments, we will do it. So the functionality is there, but we are really thinking about dropping them. But again, I mean, decision is still pending. Okay, so moving on to the next part of the site that I wanted to talk. So this is about queues. So basically, with the module, we parse all the files of the project. That is relatively quick, even up for Drupal core. I don't know if it was 15 to 20,000 files. It wouldn't take that long. So we can even parse, technically, all the files on a cron call. That's all right. By parse, I mean read the file, dump that somewhere in the database. That's about the extent of the parsing. But then, once we have that information, a file can contain a lot of information. So from the information of a file, we have a kind of file entity. We could have a class entity, or an interface, or a function, whatever the file is. We have the methods within that class. We have the constants. We have the properties. We have the namespace that file belongs to. We have inheritance information because we are extending a class. So as you can see, from a file, I can obtain a lot of information. And that's kind of where queues came into place, because all the above is really time-consuming. Parsing the file, easy. Extracting all the information for each individual file, not so quick and easy. So the options were really cron or queues, but again, it's really time-consuming. So what we're doing is the parsing is happening on cron because we tested even with core. I mean, core was our edge case. If it can handle core, it can handle pretty much anything else. And cron was good on cron, so just do the initial parsing there. But then for everything else, if we want to extract all that information, if we want to link it together, inheritance and all that, doing it through cron, it just took like a few hours, which, was not an option in this case. So we went through the option of queues because actually from those few thousands of files, we would actually get a lot of many other thousands of tasks to evaluate and convert to different objects. If cron was used, it could take hours for big repositories. And the good thing is that queues, by default, if you just define a queue worker, it will be hooked up to cron because it's got an annotation. But if you remove that one line of code, you can make it independent. So you can make cron run independent from queues. And that's exactly what we did. So we created a series of queues. We are running those queues every X minutes, but never in parallel. The reason why we are not running queues in parallel is because if we say that we are calculating the inheritance and dependencies, we want to actually parse all the information and have all the classes parsed so that we can start connecting them together. If we were to run them in parallel, we might start connecting before they have been parsed. So it is sequential, but it is okay. That's kind of a process that is running like all the time. It's running every, I think, 5 minutes setup now, but yeah, we can just take it. And it will take hours, but it's okay. It's okay because, I mean, how often does the code changes? It doesn't, once we have parsed it, it won't change that much until the newer minor version. And because of the time that it takes, we actually try to prioritize memory consumption. Whether you want it or not, whether you ask Drupal or not, Drupal will cache in memory, and by default, every entity that you load. So if you do entity load ID, it will cache it in memory, even if you are not telling Drupal to cache it. So what happens when you run a cron of thousands and thousands and thousands of jobs? So the memory at the beginning goes well, I start to grow, start to grow, start to grow, start to grow. Most of the modules, web form, gym, they will be okay. They will come to a point in which that's totally okay. Even if my local machine core was okay. I mean, and by okay, I mean the job finished at some point. But then we deployed to one of our testing environments. I was just never finishing. It was just crashing all the time. So in the case of Chrome, we realized that the memory consumption was getting all the way up to nearly 4 gigabytes of RAM memory. That is a lot. So we needed to do something about it. It took a little bit of investigation, knowing that Drupal, by default, does it whether you want it or not. So after that, basically the fix, in our case, after each task, we just clear the caches that were built during that task, because it's obviously when we're talking about inheritance, we are connecting things, but during all the parsing that we do at the beginning, they are pretty much independent entities, so we don't need to have them loaded in memory. And what we did when we are building relationships, we are just trying to cache as much as possible without abusing. Once we did that fix, we never went over 100 megs of memory. And even if it takes hours, that's totally okay. So that was an interesting case. I put this session, I realized that the sessions that I'm referencing in my slides, they have already happened. This happened this morning, but maybe you can see the recording once it's available. It's about queues. I'm sure that there is a bit of overlap with the things that we've talked about, and I'm sure that they go much more in depth than I just done here. Moving on to the infrastructure side of things. So the project, the new project that we are trying to build at the association, we're all using Kubernetes for the new servers. Like the event site that we've been all visiting, that's already on Drupal 10, and that's on Kubernetes, and this project is the same. Yeah, just mentioned this. And what we use is Helm charts. I don't know if you are familiar with it. I know very little about Kubernetes, but I know YAML. And basically, these Helm charts, they are YAML files, which contain not all the configuration. In this case, the overrides that we want to do, which are specific. So there is a kind of common repository for all the D10 sites. And then each individual site will have their overrides. In this case, is the Chrome jobs, the queue definitions, for example, the deployment steps that we want to do every time that I deploy the site. So all of that is defined via Helm charts. Yeah, backups, etc., all these kind of things. And in this case, we've built it so that it's fully automated, so that if we just push to certain branch, it will just deploy automatically. In this case, dev, stage, and prod branches. So we just need to push there, and the code will just go there. It will run Drush deploy. It will do all the things that needs to be done. Again, this has happened already. It happened a few hours ago, but some of you were there. Although, in this case, our infra partners couldn't come to the conference, but yeah, in there we talk a little bit about the infrastructure related to the Drupal 10 sites. There is actually no recording of this because it was an above room, so sorry about that, but again, if you need details, reach out to me. I'm happy to expand on it. Moving to the next question is custom or contrib. So one could argue that this module was really designed to run the api.drupal.org, and it could be a custom module from the site. But in reality, if we look at it, I mean, at the very beginning, I was presenting generic tools that would parse the code and generate a website. That is exactly what this module does. So even if it's called API, and even if we use it heavily for the API website, at the end of the day, it is a generic tool. And we can parse any PHP code base. I was mentioning core, web form, gene theme, but I could mention Laravel, I could mention Symfony, I could mention any, in this case, PHP related code base. So it can actually be made a product as all the tools that we mentioned, but it just happened to be built in Drupal. So in this case, contrib was the way to go. The module is fully available, not the site, but just wait until 2 or 3 more clicks, and you will be fine with that. So the new api.drupal.org site has no custom modules in it. It uses API, admin toolbar, just because I want to. But it's not really needed. Path author, facets, redirect, search API to give some search functionalities. We use as a theme by default Blue Cheese, the 2.x. This was amazing because it was done by the community. Blue Cheese is the kind of typical thing that you find on all our Drupal websites. It was Drupal 7, community took it over and made the 2.x version, so thanks for that. And then obviously Drush to run some commands. And this is what I said that you should be okay, because really, I mean, and this 98% is even too little. It's 99.9% is the API module, 0.1% is site building. And proof of that is the last part of the slides where I'm going to show you how to create your own API site, and you are going to get it in 3 clicks, and it works. So this is precisely the section that I wanted to talk. If you want to create your own parser site, you can easily do it. I mean, I realized that, when I'm working on projects, I like to destroy and redo many times over the same thing, because that kind of teaches you how to put it in a new environment, and eventually you kind of script it a little bit. And then I realized that it was so generic. I had it at the beginning on the site, but then I thought, why don't I move that script to the module and just make it available to people in case they want to try, they want to play with it. And that was the case. I mean, it was so generic that you can find that in the demo folder within the project. It has a README file on it, and it's got a script.sh file in it. And you can run locally, and you will have, out of the box, a brand new Drupal 10 site on the latest version, with the latest version of the API site, with 3 modules set up and parse. And in this case, it uses ddev to launch the site, but you can replace ddev for Lando or for whichever. I mean, if you open the file, it's literally 15 commands, and they're all prefixed with ddev. So if you're using any other tool, you can just happily replace it, and it will do the job equally. And what would the result of running that script be? So as you can see, Drupal out of the box, Olivero, and we will get 3 projects, small, medium, and my favorite one, Project Browser. And then you can see that you can navigate through it, you can search, you can get all the functionality that we are used. We can see all the tabs to change between the different branches of a project. And you can see that it's all the functionality that we are so used to seeing api.drupal.org in your own local copy within seconds. And then we can see, all this, some of the things are massive and they don't look too right because it's Olivero by default. We wouldn't, on the final version of the site, we're not going to put the titles so big. But you can see that everything is working. Everything is just linked as well. You can see all the links in there that you have links to the file, to the different functions, to the services. So everything that you see today on the api.drupal.org, you will see in your local copy within a few seconds. I don't know how I'm running with time. That's good. If any of you want me to show you the demo in my machine, we can just run it in a few seconds, or otherwise I invite you to do it, and I'm happy to point you to anything that you need. I want to leave some time for the Q&A, but before that, I'm going to ask myself a few questions, and I'm going to save you the time. Is it live already? No, it's not. I'm sorry to hear that. For myself and for you that it's not fully live yet. Everything is built, everything is working, and everything is just sitting on a shelf in there, just waiting for somebody to take it and put it live. But as you know, the DA team, we are a relatively small team, and I always say the same. When people tell me, when are we going to have this, like the issue migration, or project browser endpoint, or the API side, it's like, okay, these are our tasks, just put them in order of priority. And we will need to do the top one. And that's really what's holding this up. I mean, this project has been built for more than a year, but I mean, I was talking about it to some of you at the con. The only reason why we have not prioritized this is because the second that we make it live, that means that it's one more project that we need to maintain because it's live, okay? Whereas, yeah. And also, there are other competing priorities. In this case, as you know, some of the key initiatives, like automatic updates, that needs the tough and rugged framework. Then there is also Project Browser. And there are many things that are sitting on top of this project, which, I mean, I'm fine. Once you understand the context of the size of the team, then it's okay, maybe more people will benefit from automatic updates and Project Browser than a new updated version of the API website. We have a kind of running version of it, so it's not super high priority. But yeah, it's not live yet, but you can test it in there. In fact, every time that somebody opens an issue against the API module, I go and I test it on that URL, and I see if it's working or not. And if it's working, I say, the new version of the site is working already, so this is postponed. And the reason why it does not work on the older version of the site is because it's running on PHP 5.6, it's running on an old version of the library that I'm about to mention in a bit, and some of the new features available in PHP, they didn't even exist when the Drupal 7 site and libraries were built, so it just doesn't know what to do with them. They are not linked just because it doesn't know how to parse them, how to, yeah, expand them. So yeah, this leads me, so how does the parsing happen? So we are not doing the parsing ourselves. There is a very, very cool tool out there that does the heavy lifting for us. Is this library, and this is what I mentioned, the current site is using an older version of that library that does not support newer PHP features. But right now, we are using the latest version of that library, which means that it supports the newer versions, so the newer features of PHP. So that's the library that we use. And then how does it work? So we try to make it, the old site was a bit cumbersome. You needed to upload a folder to the server, and then you needed to fill up a massive UI form telling the location of the folder and branches information and all these kind of things. When I started to work on that, I saw that it was taking me a long time to do every single time. And as I told you before, I like destroying and redoing. It was very time consuming. We are developers. If only we could do something that would automate the thing for us. That's what I did. I started as a drush command. And because I did it as a drush command, then I started and I did a UI abstraction as well. It's a quick wizard. And all you need to do is put the repo URL. And I mean, you can still put the folder if you want to, but all you need to do is put the repo URL, click a button, or hit the command, and you're done. And that's actually what I'm running in that script that I mentioned before. Then we run cron to scan all available files. This was the first step. Then we run the queues. So when we are generating the site locally, that's the step that takes a bit longer because the examples module actually is rather long, especially in the last branch, the 4.x, I think. And then when we are running, so we are creating or updating existing entities. Then we are creating the relationships. For that, we need to gather all the parents and children. And then also, I wanted to kind of say that there are new commits to the 10.1.x that have come, but there is not a minor version. So I added the possibility of rescanning the files automatically. So we can just set a defined time, which could be 1 day, 1 week, 1 month. And after that time, it will just do a git pull in the repo, and it will reparse everything. So any new patches that have come into the branch that didn't make it to the newer minor version will be parsed again. And then we go to 3 again. We run the queue. So these were the pre-Q&A. Q&A. Now, this was, yeah, pretty much the content of the session. Are there any questions? Yeah, if you have a question, there is a mic over there, or I have 2 more mics over here. Ah, okay, cool. Yes, so we have a question already. Where and or who will make the final decision about whether to drop the comments? I can promise you that that's not going to be me. We will basically talk about it internally. I mean, as you know, the thing is Neil Drum, Tim Lennon, myself, Brendan. So I don't know if we will create an issue to discuss it, but in any case, I'm not concerned because I built the functionality to import the comments, but I don't know who is going to make the final call. We will need to discuss it, and we will need to make the call. It might be that we actually import the comments, but do not allow new comments. As in, we show them, but we don't allow further comments. I think that might be a good compromise. But again, that decision hasn't been taken yet. No more live questions. Yeah, go ahead.
There you go. You said that when you're scanning the code, you ignore the vendor folder. Do you actually ignore it, or do you even install it in the first place? And if you are running an install, why do you do that?
Yes, so in the D7 version, we are running compose and install, and that's why the vendor folder comes in. In the newer version, we are not doing that. And there are some parameters that can be added to exclude some folders. So say that you have some fixtures folder that contains dummy code, you can ignore them if you want. But yeah, the main difference is that in D7 we are running compose and install, and we are not doing it in the newer version. And that was a deliberate decision.
Thank you.
Any other question? Well, in that case, thank you, everybody.